The emergency klaxons screamed through the bioresearch station's corridors like wounded animals, their piercing wails echoing off metallic walls that had known only the gentle hum of hydroponic systems for the past 3 years. Finn Carver's hands never trembled as he worked among his beloved plants, but today they shook as he sealed the atmospheric breach protocols and watched his life's work. Rows upon rows of rare botanical specimens from 17 different worlds wither under the station's emergency lockdown. Station Keeper Carver, the automated system announced in its maddeningly calm voice. Long-range sensors have detected an unidentified vessel on collision course. Impact in 17 minutes. Evacuation pod deployment recommended. Finn pushed a strand of dark hair from his eyes and glanced at the evacuation pod's blinking green light. 3 years of solitude on Research Station Kepler-7 had taught him that running wasn't always the answer. Sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries came from the most terrifying moments. His fingers traced the communication panel, connecting him to the nearest administrative hub. Station Administrator Reed, this is Finn. I'm reading the proximity alerts, but I'm not evacuating. Whatever's coming might need help. Tobias Reed's voice crackled through the static, tinged with the bureaucratic panic Finn had grown to despise. Carver, you don't understand. We've identified the vessel. It's her ship, the Devourer. Every world in 3 sectors has standing orders to destroy on sight. Get to that pod now. The name sent ice through Finn's veins. Even in the isolated comfort of his greenhouse sanctuary, he'd heard the whispered stories that traveled between stations like digital ghosts. The Devourer, a creature of shadow and consuming energy that left barren worlds in her wake. Children across the galaxy feared her name, and hardened soldiers spoke of her only in hushed tones. Finn, are you listening? 15 minutes to impact. The evacuation window is closing. But Finn was already moving toward the observation deck, drawn by something he couldn't name. Through the reinforced viewing portal, he watched as a ship, unlike anything in the galactic databases, limped through space toward them. It wasn't the predatory vessel he'd expected, sleek and menacing like the story suggested. Instead, it tumbled end over end, bleeding exotic energy into the void like luminous blood from a wounded star. The ship struck the station's outer hull with surprising gentleness, as if its pilot had used the last of her strength to minimize damage. Emergency systems engaged automatically, creating an atmospheric pocket around the breach. Finn found himself suiting up in the emergency gear, his scientific curiosity overriding every survival instinct screaming at him to flee. Finn, status report. Reed's voice carried new urgency. The ship ... She tried to minimize impact damage. If she's as destructive as the stories claim, why would she care about preserving the station? Because she's setting a trap. Get out of there. But Finn was already cycling through the airlock into the damaged section. The corridor filled with strange, aurora-like light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The metal walls bore scorch marks that formed patterns too beautiful to be random destruction. They looked almost like script written in some language of pure energy. The ship had embedded itself into what used to be Greenhouse 7, his experimental section for bioluminescent flora. Through the twisted metal, Finn could see the pilot slumped over unfamiliar controls. She was smaller than he'd expected and utterly still. As he approached, his instruments went wild. Radiation readings spiked and fell in waves, but the energy signatures were unlike anything in the scientific literature. It wasn't the harsh radiation of weapons or engines. It felt organic, almost alive. His bioenergy scanner, designed to read the electrical fields of living plants, hummed with readings so complex they bordered on musical. She was beautiful. A thought struck him with startling clarity as he knelt beside her unconscious form. Her skin held the translucent quality of deep ocean water, shifting between blue and silver with each shallow breath. Patterns of light moved beneath her skin like living tattoos, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her hair flowed around her, shoulders like liquid starlight, and her features, while clearly not human, held a delicate symmetry that spoke of evolution on a world where aesthetics and function had become one. Most stunning were her hands. Long-fingered and graceful, they were surrounded by a faint nimbus of energy that made the air itself shimmer. These were the hands that supposedly turned thriving worlds into cosmic graveyards. "Warning," his suits. Computer announced. "Detecting massive bioelectrical field. Recommend immediate withdrawal." Finn ignored it. Every scientific instinct told him to study her, to understand what she truly was beneath the layers of galactic fear and propaganda. Every human instinct told him she was hurt and needed help. He reached toward her, then stopped. If even half. The stories were true. Touching her would mean death or worse. But as he hesitated, she stirred, and her eyes opened. They were the color of nebulae, being warm deep purple shot through with silver and gold, containing depths that seemed to hold the memory of distant stars. For a moment, they stared at each other across the space of a few inches in an infinite gulf of species difference. "You should run," she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made his bones resonate. "I don't want to hurt you." The words were spoken in perfect galactic standard, but underneath them, Finn heard something else: centuries of loneliness, exhaustion that went bone deep, and a desperate hope that someone, somewhere, might see her as more than a monster. "I'm not running," Finn said, settling more comfortably beside her makeshift crash site. "My name is Finn. What's yours?" She blinked in surprise, as if the question itself was foreign. "Names are for beings who can safely touch others. I am what your people call the Devourer." "That's what others call you. What do you call yourself?" The question seemed to physically pain her. She closed those stellar eyes for a long moment before answering. "Once, very long ago, I was called Nissa." Nissa. Finn let the name settle between them like a bridge across impossible distance. "That's a beautiful name. It means beginning in one of the old Earth languages." A sound escaped her that might have been laughter or might have been a sob. Beginning. How ironic. I am an ending, Finn of the research station. I am entropy given form, the inevitable conclusion to all things that live and grow and dare to hope. "Maybe," Finn said, studying the energy patterns that danced around her prone form. "Or maybe you're something else entirely, and the galaxy just doesn't know how to understand you yet." She tried to sit up, wincing as exotic energy crackled around her. Where it touched the station's bulkheads, metal twisted and reformed into impossible geometric patterns. "You don't know what you're saying. I have destroyed entire ecosystems simply by existing too close to them. I have watched civilizations crumble to dust because I dared to walk among them. Have you ever tried not to?" The question hung in the recycled air between them. Nissa stared at him with those impossible eyes, and for the first time in their brief acquaintance, she seemed truly lost for words. "I what? Have you ever tried not destroying things? Or has everyone been so busy running away that no one's ever bothered to study what you actually do?" Reed's voice crackled through, his system distant and increasingly frantic. "Finn, emergency ships are en route. You have maybe an hour before they arrive with orders to sterilize the entire station. Get out of there." Finn reached up and switched off his never breaking eye contact with Nissa. "What do you think?" "Want to spend an hour figuring out if the galaxy's most feared being might actually be its most misunderstood?" Nissa stared at him for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to colors he had no names for. When she spoke, her voice carried a tremor that had nothing to do with her injuries. "You're either the bravest person in the galaxy or the most foolish. Finn smiled, settling in beside her crashed ship. My research partner always said those were the same thing. Now, let's see if we can figure out what you really are before the cavalry arrives to blast us both into cosmic dust. For the first time in centuries, Nyssa found herself smiling back. Outside the station, the stars wheeled in their ancient courses, unaware that two beings from different sides of the galaxy had just begun a conversation that would change everything they thought they knew about love, fear, and the space between destruction and creation. The first thing Finn noticed about Nyssa when she was fully conscious was how carefully she moved. Every gesture was calculated, precise, as if she carried invisible chains that governed her every motion. She sat propped against the twisted remains of her ship's hull, maintaining exactly 3 feet of distance between them, close enough to speak without shouting over the station's emergency systems, far enough that her energy field wouldn't reach him. "Tell me about your research," she said, nodding toward the bioscanners he'd brought with him. Her voice held genuine curiosity beneath its otherworldly harmonics. "What were you studying before I interrupted your work?" Finn adjusted his equipment, noting how the readings fluctuated in her presence. Bioelectrical fields in plant consciousness. "I've been trying to understand how flora from different worlds develop unique electrical signatures, almost like fingerprints. But for entire ecosystems." Plant consciousness. Her luminescent patterns shifted to deeper blues. Most beings assume plants have no awareness. Most beings assume a lot of things without evidence. He met her gaze directly. "For instance, they assume you're a mindless destroyer." Nyssa's laugh was bitter music. "Perhaps they're not wrong. Would you like to know how many worlds bear scars from my presence? How many civilizations learned to fear the night because creatures like me move through darkness? I'd rather know why you crash-landed here instead of simply purring if you're as powerful as they say." She was quiet for so long that Finn wondered if he'd overstepped some invisible boundary. When she finally spoke, her words carried the weight of exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "I was trying to reach the void sectors, the empty space between spiral arms where nothing lives. I thought, if I could exile myself far enough from anything that could live and grow, perhaps I could finally rest without causing harm." Her patterns flickered weakly, but my ship failed. Even my technology cannot withstand prolonged exposure to what I am. Finn's bioscanner chimed softly, displaying readings that made him lean forward with interest. "Nyssa, look at this. Your energy field. It's not random destruction. There's a pattern here, almost like what? Like a plant's electrical field when it's in distress. The same signature I see when flora are responding to environmental trauma or trying to communicate. Danger to their root networks." Her stellar eyes widened. "That's impossible. I am not." I donned single quotes T ... double quotes. "When did this start? Your condition?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Her energy field pulsed violently, and the metal around them groaned and bent. Finn's instruments shrieked warnings, but he didn't move away. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I don't need to know if it hurts to remember. No one has ever." She stopped, struggling with concepts that seemed foreign to her. No one has ever asked when it started. They only ask how to make it stop. They sat in the growing twilight of the station's emergency lighting, two beings separated by biology and space, but connected by something neither fully understood. Outside, through the twisted metal of the breach, stars watched like distant witnesses to their impossible conversation. "I was young," Nyssa finally whispered. "My people were beings of energy and harmony. We lived in symbiosis with our world's ecosystem, our life force intertwined with every growing thing. But there was a war." Her patterns darkened to deep purples and blacks. Invaders came with weapons designed to sever our connection to life itself. They succeeded beyond their wildest intentions. The trauma changed you. It broke something fundamental in how my energy connects to living things. Instead of nurturing life, I began consuming it. My own people feared me. I became an exile, fleeing across the galaxy, leaving barren ground wherever I tried to rest. Finn's scanner continued its soft beeping, mapping the ebb and flow of her energy field. Nissa, what if you're not broken? What if you're just tangled? She tilted her head, confusion replacing the ancient sadness in her expression. In botanical terms, sometimes a plant's growth becomes inverted when it experiences severe trauma. Instead of reaching toward light and nutrition, it begins consuming its own root system. But with the right environment, the right care, ... He gestured to his equipment. The growth pattern can be retrained. You think I can be ... retrained? Her voice held a dangerous hope that made the air around them shimmer. I think you're the most fascinating biological puzzle I've ever encountered. And I think the galaxy has been so busy running from you that no one's ever tried to understand what you actually are. Tobias Reed's voice suddenly crackled through the station's emergency communication system, making them both jump. Carver, I'm reading massive energy signatures from your section. What's your status? Finn looked at Nissa, seeing the familiar fear creeping back into her stellar eyes. The fear that said she expected him to betray her, to call for help, to do what everyone else had done for centuries. Instead, he reached for his communicator. Station secure read. False alarm. Some equipment feedback from the atmospheric breach. I'm handling the repairs. Are you certain? The readings were getting suggest. Uncertain. Carver out. He switched off the comm and found Nissa staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Her energy field had withdrawn so completely that she looked almost human in the emergency lighting. Why? She asked. Because 3 years of talking to plants has taught me that the most beautiful things in the universe are often the most misunderstood. And because ... double quotes, he hesitated, then forged ahead. Because when you look at my greenhouse equipment, you don't look like someone who destroys. You look like someone who remembers what it felt like to create. Tears that glowed like liquid starlight traced down her cheeks. I do remember. Every day, I remember what it felt like when my touch brought forth flowers instead of ash. Without thinking, Finn reached toward her, wanting to comfort her as he would any suffering creature. Nissa recoiled so violently that her energy field exploded outward, and the metal wall behind her turned to dust in a 3-foot radius. Don't! She gasped, horror replacing every other emotion. Never reach for me, Finn. Promise me. No matter how much we ... no matter what develops between us, you must never forget what I am. But as the energy dust settled around them, Finn noticed something the readings had missed. In the center of the destruction, where her hand had touched the wall, something impossible had happened. A small section of the metal hadn't been destroyed. It had been transformed into something that looked almost like crystallized starlight, beautiful and strange, and completely harmless. Nissa, he said quietly, pointing to the transformed section. Look, she followed his gaze and gasped. For just a moment, her field had created instead of destroyed. For just a moment, she had touched the world the way she remembered from before the war. How is that possible? Finn smiled, his mind already racing with theories and possibilities. Maybe because for the first time in centuries, someone was sitting close enough to see what you actually do instead of running away in terror. In the growing darkness of the station, with emergency lights casting long shadows around them, two beings from different worlds began to believe that even the most impossible chasms could be bridged by understanding, patience, and the kind of courage that chooses to stay when everything logical says to run. Will you trust me? Finn asked. Will you let me try to understand? Nissa looked at the crystallized starlight where destruction should have been, then back at the human who sat fearlessly in the shadow of the galaxy's greatest monster. "I will try," she whispered, "but Finn... If I hurt you, if my control fails... then we'll figure out how to heal together." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, but inside Research Station Kepler-7, something new was beginning, something that would prove love could indeed grow in the darkest spaces between worlds. 3 days into their impossible coexistence, Finn had transformed Greenhouse 7 into something between a laboratory and a sanctuary. The twisted metal from Nissa's crash had been carefully rearranged to create a space where she could move freely without touching anything vital, while his instruments monitored every fluctuation in her energy field. "Try again," Finn encouraged, watching as Nissa extended her hand toward a dying stellar orchid he'd placed on an isolated platform. "Remember what we discovered about your emotional state affecting the field intensity." Nissa's patterns shifted to nervous yellows and golds. "What if I destroy it completely this time? It's already so fragile. Then we'll have learned something valuable. Science isn't about avoiding failure. It's about understanding what failure teaches us." She nodded, closing her eyes in concentration. Finn watched his instruments carefully as her energy field condensed, becoming more controlled than he'd seen it since her arrival. The readings showed waves of bioelectrical activity that reminded him increasingly of the communication patterns he'd observed in symbiotic plant networks. Her fingertips came within inches of the orchid's translucent petals. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the flower began to glow with soft, pearl-like luminescence. "Nissa," Finn breathed. "Look." Her eyes snapped open, and she gasped. The orchid hadn't been destroyed. It had been revitalized. Its drooping petals had straightened, and new buds were forming along its crystalline stem. More incredibly, the energy signature Finn's scanners detected was one of pure symbiosis, a kind of harmonious biological relationship that took ecosystems millennia to develop. "I healed it," she whispered, wonder replacing the constant undertone of self-loathing in her voice. "I actually healed it." "You did more than heal it. According to these readings, you've established a symbiotic connection. The plant is now drawing energy from your field in a perfectly balanced exchange. You're giving it life, and it's giving you..." He paused, studying the data. "Stability. Your energy field is more controlled now than it's been since you arrived." Nissa stared at the glowing orchid as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Is this how it felt before? I can barely remember... "We're going to help you remember," Finn said, then caught himself. "If you want to, that is, if you want to try." Before she could answer, the airlock cycled with a hiss that made them both freeze. Finn's heart sank as he recognized the atmospheric signature. Someone had just arrived from the outside, and they hadn't announced themselves through proper channels. "Finn?" A familiar voice called through the corridor. "Finn, where are you?" "The emergency beacon has been active for 3 days." Myra Ocean stepped through the twisted doorway of Greenhouse 7, her emergency suit's headlamp cutting through the auroral light that surrounded Nissa. Finn's research partner and oldest friend stopped dead when she saw them together. Human botanists sitting calmly beside the galaxy's most feared being. "Oh my God," Myra breathed, her hand moving instinctively toward the emergency beacon on her belt. "Finn, get away from her. Now." "Myra, wait, that's the Devourer." "Do you have any idea what she's done? What she's capable of?" Myra's voice rose with panic. The Centauri colonies, the gardens of New Eden, entire biospheres turned to ash. Nissa flinched as if physically struck, her energy field spiking with anguish. Around them, metal began to corrode and warp. The beautiful orchid withered instantly, its newfound glow fading to nothing. "See?" Nissa said, her voice hollow. This is why I travel alone. This is why I was fleeing to the void sectors. Every moment of connection only leads to more destruction. No, Finn said firmly, placing himself between Myra and Nissa. Myra, you're reacting to stories. I've been studying her for 3 days. She's not what the reports claim. Not what the Finn. Are you insane? Look around you. Look at what she did to your greenhouse. Look at what trauma and fear do to her energy field. Finn countered, gesturing to his instruments. Her destructive. Episodes correlate directly with emotional distress. When she's calm, when she feels safe, her field stabilizes. She was healing that orchid before you arrived. Myra's laugh was sharp with disbelief. Healing? Finn, she's a cosmic predator. She feeds on life force. I don't feed, Nissa said quietly, her patterns dimming to barely visible silver threads. I don't control it. It simply happens. When I feel threatened, when others fear me, my field responds. But I don't choose it. Then why don't you stay away from populated worlds? Mira demanded. Why do you keep appearing near colonies? And outposts? Nissa's silence stretched so long that Finn thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her words were barely audible above the station's humming systems. Because I'm lonely. The simple confession hung in the recycled air, like a confession of the universe's cruelest joke. Finn felt his heart break for her as being so isolated that she risked destroying everything she tried to connect with, simply because the alternative was eternal solitude. Myra, Finn said carefully, I need you to trust me. Trust what I've learned. She's not a monster. She's a victim of something that was done to her. Finn, I'm calling this in. The authorities need to know. The authorities will kill her without asking questions. You know that. Myra's hand hovered over her emergency beacon, torn between protocol and her trust in Finn's judgment. What are you asking me to do? Help you harbor the galaxy's most wanted fugitive? I'm asking you to help me prove that everything the galaxy believes about her is wrong. Nissa stood slowly, her energy field contained but visible as heat shimmer around her form. No, she's right to be afraid. I should leave before I cause more damage. Where will you go? Finn asked. Back to fleeing. Through empty space? Back to centuries of isolation, while your pain grows stronger and your control grows weaker? It's better than destroying everything I touch. Is it? Finn turned to his instruments, pulling up the data he'd collected over the past 3 days. Myra, look at these readings. Really look at them. Despite her fear, Myra's scientific training compelled her to examine the data. Finn watched her expression change as she absorbed what the instruments had recorded. These energy patterns, she said slowly, they're not random. They're structured, almost like communication attempts, Finn finished. Like someone trying desperately to connect with living systems, but lacking the proper interface. Protocols. Nissa moved closer to them, hope and terror warring in her expression. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe your field isn't destroying life. Maybe it's trying to communicate with it in a language that's too intense, too concentrated. Like shouting at someone who can only hear whispers. Myra studied the readings more carefully, her fear gradually being replaced by scientific fascination. If that's true, then theoretically, we could develop a method to modulate the field intensity. Create a buffer that would allow controlled contact. You'd help me? Nissa asked, disbelief coloring her patterns gold. I'd help Finn, Mira corrected. And if Finn believes you're worth helping, then ... She took a deep breath. Then maybe I've been wrong about what monsters actually look like. For the next several hours, the greenhouse became a laboratory unlike any in galactic history. Finn and Mira worked with equipment designed to study plant bioelectricity, adapting it to understand and potentially modulate an alien energy field that had terrified the galaxy for generations. Try this, Finn said, activating a bioelectric field generator he'd modified with Myra's help. I'm creating a buffer field calibrated to your base frequency. It should allow your energy to interface with living systems without overwhelming them. Nissa approached another dying plant, a Terran rose that had been withering since the station's emergency protocols began. Through the shimmering barrier of Finn's generated field, she extended her hand. The moment contact was made, the rose exploded into bloom. Not just bloomed, it became something transcendent, its petals shifting through colors that had no names, its stems strengthening and branching into impossible geometric patterns that were beautiful beyond description. The transformation spread to nearby plants, creating a cascade of renewed life that filled the greenhouse with light and perfume. "My God," Mira whispered. "She's not destroying them. She's awakening them." Nissa pulled her hand back, staring at the transformed garden around them. Tears of liquid light traced her cheeks. "Is this what I was meant to do? Before the war? Before the breaking?" "I think," Finn said softly, "this is what you've been trying to do all along. Your energy field wasn't trying to destroy. It was trying to heal, to enhance, to connect. But without proper modulation, it was like trying to water a flower with a fire hose." She turned to him, her patterns now cycling through every color in the spectrum, and several that existed nowhere else. "In the known universe. Finn, if this is real, if I can truly touch and heal instead of destroy... She moved toward him, her hand extended, and Finn felt his breath catch. Through the buffer field, he could feel the edges of her energy warm and alive, and more wonderful than anything he'd ever experienced. But as their hands drew closer, the field generator began to overload. "The equipment can't handle the emotional intensity," Mira called out, frantically adjusting controls. "Her field strength is increasing beyond the buffer's capacity." Nissa jerked her hand back just as the generator sparked and died. Where Finn's outstretched hand had been, the air still shimmered with residual energy that felt like the promise of something impossible. "We were so close," Nissa said, her voice breaking. "We'll be closer next time," Finn promised. "This is just the beginning, Nissa. We've proven that connection is possible. Now we just need to perfect the method." As if summoned by their breakthrough, Reed's voice crackled through the communication system with news that turned their moment of triumph into the prelude to their greatest challenge. "Carver, we've got problems. Long-range sensors are detecting a fleet of galactic enforcement vessels heading your way. Someone reported energy signatures consistent with Devourer presence. You've got maybe 18 hours before they arrive." Finn looked at Nissa, seeing his own determination reflected in her stellar eyes. 18 hours to prove that love could indeed change the universe, or watch it all burn in the fires of galactic fear. "Then we'd better get to work," he said, already reaching for his equipment. "Mira, can you help us build something stronger?" Mira looked between them, the human who saw possibilities where others saw only terror, and the being who had traveled across the galaxy fleeing from her own nature. Finally, she nodded. "Let's give the galaxy something new to talk about." In the greenhouse laboratory that had become their sanctuary, three beings began to work against time itself, racing to prove that even the darkest legends could be rewritten by those brave enough to look beyond the surface of fear.